And now segment 2 of my continued talk with Robin Bucknall about the gold, silver, bronze tiering from Emergency Management Services. Enjoy. I know we were talking about this before we started recording, and I've been in organizations that we have established crisis management teams and protocols and plans in place already. And to change that could cause significant turmoil. Has that occurred? Are you aware of anything like that where it's just fallen flat on its face because of it?
It's not so much that it's fallen flat on its face. I think where we've discovered some challenges is where organizations have heard of the bronze, silver, and gold and thought that sounds like a great idea, and then tried to apply it without a true understanding of what it is they want to achieve. And so our advice has always been to start off with mapping what decisions need to be taken by whom and in what timescale, and then looking at the current business as usual delegations, because once you look at what strategic decisions need to be taken and who would take them, and that tends to come from the delegations and authorities that senior management have, where the integration and coordination of activity routinely occurs, and who would then direct the implementation of that. Once you've mapped that decision making in the authorities, you get a feel for whether you require a true separation of strategic, tactical, and operational, or as I said earlier, whether some of those actually can be combined, and you end up with, for instance, in some universities, you end up with the tactical level really covering a large part of the strategic direction of the incident response, and also the coordination function, with only a very small group really approving a couple of strategic issues. So you find it's a very big silver in the example we're talking about, but with a very small gold above it, and perhaps a number of different bronze commands underneath. So that's where starting with the decision that you need to take, and then arriving at whether you need a bronze, silver, gold is the right way, rather than starting with bronze, silver, and gold and applying it to the organization.
I'm glad you covered both sides there, because I was thinking that sometimes, especially in large organizations with multiple levels, that politics can get in the way. And
Yep.
I kind of said it earlier, I'm a VP. Why aren't I in gold? I'm a decision maker. Even in a crisis, I may not be the one making decisions. I'm still going to huff and puff and be upset that somebody else who doesn't have a VP title, who may be a team leader or may just be someone who is on site, suddenly is in the gold right now, and I'm not automatically. Is that something that you also need to consider?
So Alex, you talked about the title of my article, and that was really behind it, which was we have come across a number of cases where, particularly with high status, particularly high earners, or revenue generators, or people who take great esteem from their job titles, the gold, silver, bronze can be mistaken as implying a value within the organization. So, as I said, it came from the emergency services, and because it's underpinned by a doctrine and is commonly understood, it's known not to reflect the status of the person in charge. So, for instance, as I said, you could have a more senior person arriving but not taking command. And this is where it hasn't necessarily translated smoothly into industry, where some people have taken the gold as implying a status within the organization, and therefore, if they're not in gold, it's somehow a personal slight, and that therefore it is demeaning their status. Conversely, we've also discovered that at the bronze level, bronze, third place, less important. We've actually found it to be, in some cases, a disincentive to taking the initiative. Oh, I'm only bronze. I'll wait for somebody in gold to tell me what to do. So, the unintended consequences of the implied value particularly if it's not applied with some thought, can have unintended consequences.
I like how you explained that. I was thinking that when it comes to emergency services, everyone's got the same goal in mind. People safety. And as an example, I'll just use people safety. But when something happens, let's say to a financial institution, you've got all these different people that have a different focus. It's I got to keep my revenue stream. I can't lose my customers. We got to keep our branding fine. So that's where I'm focused. And admittedly, some people in the organization, of course, are going to be focusing on people. I don't want to say it's not, but that could actually be a hindrance to gold, silver, and bronze, because they're responsible for their areas and they don't want their areas to suffer in any way.
So I think this comes really down to the heart of sort of business continuity, which is, so the emergency services are very much doing saving life, limb, and property. For businesses, it's how do you continue to maintain your core outputs during a disruption, and certainly prioritizing critical outputs where value is generated, such that the viability of the organization is not threatened. And so the purpose of incident response structures is really there to enhance business as usual management. So often we work business as usual, we're in our silos, generating revenue or delivering a particular function for the organization. And so the incident management structures are really there to complement those and not replace them during an incident, because what we want to try and achieve is actually a forum which promotes more, or breaks down barriers and promotes a better creative problem solving with a more holistic view of the situation, with better situational awareness, so that we can achieve faster and more appropriate decisions at whichever level is appropriate. So really, when we look at the strategic, tactical, and operational response structures in a crisis, we're starting with what are the decisions that would need to be taken and who is most appropriate to take them, starting with business as usual. So you may find, and every organization is different, that at the gold level, you'd normally have the chief executive and those executives who have a strategic function, for instance, the chief finance officer, or the
like CIO or somebody.
Yeah, precisely. Thank you. But at the silver level, the tactical level, you might actually find some of the chief executives that have a delivery focus and a coordination focus. So the chief operations officer or chief commercial officer or even the CIO may be at that level. And one of them, for instance, the CIO may chair the tactical response group, because it's about the conversion of strategic direction into practical activity. But they would then also sit on the gold, so they'd chair the tactical response, but also contribute to the strategic group as well. So when we're constructing incident response structures, we're very much looking at who is best placed to make a decision, what decision needs to be taken in what timescale, and do they have the delegated authorities to take that decision at that level.
You got me thinking of something. If you've got an established gold, silver, bronze in your organization, and can you actually be a member of the bronze tier on the corporate level, but be in a how do you do this? Say this, like a sub team, and be the gold member for your marketing division? Is that possible, or just does that add too much admin and confusion to everybody?
No, and that's actually a really good example. So let's take a supermarket as an example, because it's got bigger parts. So you could end up with the regional managers with a number of stores under them, really forming the tactical command group. They're the ones solving problems on the ground at the store level. But you may also have a bronze or a tactical team within, let's say, supply or logistics. So you'd have within the head office a bronze functional team within supply or operations, which are trying to solve the detailed implementation of supply problems, working alongside the regional manager who is trying to actually deal with the stores. So you could have multiple bronze commanders responsible for either different geographical locations or different functional areas, each dealing with their own level of specialism. They would then be answering back into a silver team, which would be trying to coordinate and synchronize activities between them.
Okay. Because I was just thinking of some organizations where they have their crisis management team and they're a part of, you know, the existing structure, but yet they're the lead in their team and they establish the same kind of substructure in their own areas. So I'm just wondering how that translated. So thank you for that. Are there any challenges we should be aware of? I know you mentioned, you know, decision making and things like that on when you're determining even if you should adopt GSB, but are there any challenges we should be aware of if we are going down that route? Let's say we have determined that, okay, GSB is a good fit for us. Are there any things we should watch out for?
So I think I'll go back to the emergency services on this as the start point, because one of the things that the gold, silver, and bronze structure was seeking to address was either different organizations or different parts of the same organization operating independently in an uncoordinated fashion during an incident. It also wanted to try and address three things. One was the span of command. And what I mean by that is it was trying to tidy up and specify exactly who is responsible for what and who is responsible for which tasks. So it's a delineation of responsibility. The next is a span of control. And so it's how many different moving parts of an organization can one person or one group of people realistically communicate with, engage with, coordinate the actions of, monitor their actions. And the last one was command resilience, because most crises aren't, we exercise, and typically most organizations can afford a couple of hours or half a day to an exercise, but in reality crises last, you know, multiple days, if not several weeks. And so there is that ability to then to not have just one command team which then becomes exhausted, but actually have the ability to manage perhaps 24-hour operations over 7 days a week or more. So it's the ability to know that's the forum that takes these decisions, and then these are the people that, well, you could have a chair and an alternate chair, and you could have, you know, nominated representatives and their deputies who know what their responsibilities are and what is expected of them.
Excuse me. It sounds like when you mentioned the gold, silver, bronze, you're having a chair and alternates and that, you also have to consider existing things like shift management to ensure that that chair position is continually covered. So kind of adopting still some of the existing things that we may be familiar with in, shall we say, traditional crisis management team structures. You know, we can still adopt a lot of what we have into this, right?
Absolutely, and I think none of this is nothing new under the sun. I think this is very much a structure which is trying to simplify and provide a very adaptive framework. It wasn't trying to create something which was revolutionary. It was actually taking an existing complex structure and just trying to simplify it down to its essential components. So, and that's my point about trying to use business as usual structures as much as possible and make incident response structures an enhancement and complementary to them. So unless you've got exceptional requirements, you should really see, you know, the people that would be forming strategy within a company really in the strategic crisis response team, and those normally responsible for the coordination of activity, and the conversion of the strategic plan into an activity plan would be at that tactical level, and those people responsible for doing the job on the ground would form bronze or operational teams. So it shouldn't be big changes, but what it does do is it actually formalizes how those groups come together and how they interact and the types of decisions that they should be making.
I do like what you said, especially about using and leveraging business as usual type stuff as much as possible. I'm actually doing that with some work that I'm doing now, and I'm finding that it's actually easier to get people to accept all this stuff, but because we're just enhancing what they already know rather than changing things or adding something new, that they need to consider. So I really like what you had to say there about BAU. That's good. So we've come to the end of our show. Do you have any final thoughts on this that you'd like to convey? Something that maybe we haven't touched on?
So I think the key thing for me really is whenever you're approaching an incident response structures is starting at the base principles of what are the types of decisions, what are our existing delegations and authorities. Do the operational level have the appropriate authorities to implement a quick immediate action in the event of a crisis, and what timescale are they required to respond? So for instance, if you were to have a cyber attack, does the IT team have the authorities to disconnect the system from the internet within 15 minutes unilaterally? Because those are the types of decisions that you need to think through, because if you have to wait for the gold team to then say, yes, you can do it, you may build in a delay. So it's really following the logic of what's the appropriate response that you want to have, and then checking that the existing delegations and authorities and escalation criteria are in place, and then building your incident response structure from there.
Oh, great. Well, thanks very much, Robin. I really enjoyed this. And funny enough, I know I mentioned this to you beforehand. I have a meeting very shortly, and gold, silver, bronze is actually going to be a topic we're going to touch on. So I'm definitely going to be walking into that meeting now fully armed and ready to go.
Fantastic. I'm very glad to help.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. I really enjoyed our chat today, Robin, and thanks for responding to my request to come talk about this, because I know it is being adopted in the UK and is having a measure of success, but over here in North America and maybe potentially in other areas as well, Africa and Asia, it's not so well known. So I kind of wanted everyone to kind of understand this, and including myself. So I really appreciate you sharing your time and responding and giving your insights on this.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining, and everybody listening and watching, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.